William Golding's Lord of the Flies is not only a story about mankind, but about white mankind. Although the novel discusses themes of power, human nature, civilization, morality, they are all underpinned by a post-colonial model. To fully grasp the message it is trying to illustrate, it's important to remember that Lord of the Flies is an allegory of war. As a result of a need for survival, teenage impulsivity, and male obsession with power, we quickly see priorities shift when the boys are left to their own devices. Superiority becomes more important than the common good. In the book, savagery, as the characters repeatedly say, takes the role of the colonist as Jack places himself in the position of leader. The evident irony here is that the white British boys who come from a long line of leaders and colonists becomes the savages they so despise. Stephen Holland wrote, "In thin disguise, they are Oxford and Cambridge graduates, newly arrived as administrators in a colony. Their takeover corresponds in a miniature with the way their great-grandfathers took over Africa." At the beginning of the novel, Ralph and Piggy are seen civilized as they try to maintain peace. When Jack's group, who values anarchy and savagery, takes over, Raph, along with anyone lacking a weapon, is seen as weak and lesser than. This further ties into the idea of the island as its own entity in the story. E.C. Buffkin wrote, "The island as a ship is, then, a symbol of world in microcosm. It is to the boys as first man, as garden of paradise, or as fallen angels. Hell, thus boys are not only boys, but men and angels." The island provided a secluded setting for Golding to illustrate that no group of people are able to fully suppress human nature and the intrinsic violence of man. As David Spitz wrote, "It was, if you will, a state of nature inhibited by free and equal individuals. If anything were to go wrong, as it tragically did, it could only come, then, from within. The only enemy of man was himself." This is juxtaposed multiple times when characters comment on how the British are civilized. The officer who finds the boys at the end of the novel is one example of this. He says, "I should have thought that a pack of British boys, you are British, aren't you, would have been able to put up a better show than that." Jack also says, "We've got to have rules and obey them. After all, we're not savages, we're English, and the English are best at everything, so we've got to do the right things." The novel also has its fair share of symbolism, most notably the conch. The conch is used to call meetings and thus is a symbol of democracy and order. It is also a constant reminder that Ralph was the first to use it and thus the rightful leader of the group. Moreover, in analyzing the conch through a post-colonial lens, we see that, as Stephen Holland wrote, the conch is in part a symbol of white constitutionalism and is set against, later, the dark images of tribalism. As enacted through the novel, it beautifully conveys the authority and fragility of this constitutionalism when viewed in relation to white fears of the black man. In other words, through showing the boys' gradual embrace of tribalism, Golding critiques the colonial narrative of superiority and control, thereby exposing fears and prejudices of the Western world. Lastly, the beast is the most obvious and arguably the most interesting symbol in the novel. We know that the beast in the book doesn't truly exist. It is merely a product of the boys' shared fear of it and haunts the narrative as a looming danger that could attack at any moment. The beast is a metaphor for evil, original sin, and human nature. Robert J. White wrote that the beast turns out to be human, that it has fallen and is now rotten and corrupt, emphasizes once again that the objective the boys dread is, in fact, a dark side of themselves. In other words, after discovering that the beast they so feared was nothing more than a dead parachute, we see that we as human beings are the source of our own fear, rather than some mysterious, powerful entity. When analyzing this through a post-colonial lens, we can once again see that the boys are behaving much like the communities their ancestors invaded and murdered. Behaviors like this, hunting and making blood sacrifices to a creature that does not exist, are things many indigenous communities have done for hundreds of years. In understanding this connection, Golding once again reinforces the idea that our nature as humans is one of irrational fears and violence. Lord of the Flies reevaluates colonist structures and reflects the anxieties of its time and explores the legacy of colonism and what it means to be human.